Happy Wellness Wednesday, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of the IDCA Wellness for Tech podcast, where we focus on empowering current and emerging technology leaders and those inspired by technology to lead well from within. My name is Jothi Dugar, the Chaos Guru, and I am so excited to be your host for this unique and truly revolutionary podcast. As a C-suite IT leader and executive myself, having been in the industry for decades, I understand all too well how chaotic, stressful, and high pressure the technology field can be. So I am truly excited today to bring inspirational leaders in this space to help all of us and all of you lead well from within. Today, I'm honored to be joined by our guest, Cait Donovan. Cait Donovan is a keynote speaker, one of New York City's leading burnout experts, host of Fried, the Burnout Podcast, author of the book, The Bouncebackability Factor, and an acupuncturist with a master's degree in Chinese medicine. Her creative burnout recovery solutions have been featured on podcasts and online magazines such as Forbes, NPR, and the New York Post, and in companies such as Lululemon and PepsiCo. I am so excited and grateful to have Cait on our podcast episode today. Welcome, Cait. We are so thrilled to have you here.
Jothi, thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to dig in. I love people in tech. I love women in tech. I love having this conversation. So I'm thrilled.
This is truly unique, everyone. We usually have people or leaders in technology, and we as you know, if you've listened to previous episodes where we talk about, what are they doing for their own wellness, for the wellness of their staff and people that they lead, and how have they, been fostering emerging leaders in their own organization. But today we're taking a slightly different approach. So let's jump right in. I am sure the audience is dying to hear, everything that you have to offer, Cait. So as a burnout expert, can you tell us what have you seen as the biggest factor in organizations leading to stress, burnout, and overwhelm?
That's a very big question to start off with. And I will start by saying I just did a 20-minute podcast episode on this. So I won't get into a full 20-minute explanation, but what we need to know about burnout is that everybody has a different stress load ability. It's called allostatic load, how much stress your body can sort of take or your person can take. And it doesn't really matter if person X can take 10 pounds of stress because person Y can still only take 9. So the first thing that we need to know is that there's no perfect number that's going to be accessible and okay for everybody.
Wow.
So we start with that. The next thing that we go into is there's plenty of research, 40 years of research. They started this research before I was born. Mostly done by Christina Maslach and her team, but done by others as well. Some really good stuff out of Italy, etc. There's plenty of research on why stress happens in the workplace, and they always boil it down to 6 factors. One of them is workload. Now, this can mean number of hours, or it can mean how heavy the workload is versus how much autonomy you have to do it. That there's a lot to explore there, but one of them is workload. Another is community or lack of community. So if there's no community within your people, it's going to increase the overall burnout risk factor for everyone. Mm-hmm. The next factor is fairness. This one people always get all bent out of shape about because there's no such thing that is fair to everyone. Right. So, but we do have to focus on things like pay equity and gender equity and disability access, etc. So we can work on the things that we know add to fairness.
Wow.
Another factor is lack of praise or lack of recognition. So if you are not being told in very specific terms what you are doing well, you will not be able to handle stressors as well, and you will be more prone to burnout. These are seemingly small things, but when everything piles up together, right? Another one of these factors is lack of autonomy. We put this a little bit attached to workload, but if you have no autonomy over whether or not you're going into the office, how you're getting your work done, what tool you're supposed to use for X activity, etc., this can add to your work, to your burnout risk factors. And the last of those 6 is a values mismatch. And when I say values mismatch, this can happen on 2 different levels. And I don't see this discussed a lot in the research, but I found it to be true in sort of real life situations. It can be a values mismatch between what the company says and what the company does. So the spoken values versus the values in action. If those don't match up, people don't feel safe. People don't feel safe. They are more prone to burnout because they don't know what you're going to do. They don't know if they're going to be backed up. They don't know what to, right? There's no security. They don't know what's happening. The other values mismatch can be between the person and the company. So if you are somebody who values high integrity and you work for a company that has low integrity, this is going to be problematic.
Wow. So do these factors play into psychological safety and security, or is that slightly different?
I think that they play into it, but psychological safety and security is the factor that I add on top of those 6 factors come directly from research by Christina Maslach and her team. The factor that I add separate from those is psychological safety.
Wow. Wow. I am taking a moment to process this.
It's a lot. That's why I said, this is a very big question.
My mind went straight to actually my own children and like a family dynamic. And I was thinking, wow, so these factors are what causes stress in adults in a workplace setting. I'm sure it's the same factors or similar for like children in maybe a household that's not so peaceful or a split kind of household. And, I'm a single mom and I know my children's father and I have very different, mindset, values, practices, that parenting techniques. And I think my mind went straight to, wow. So, maybe some children express it a little differently than others, and some children just, internalize things. But if these are the factors, then I'm glad I have a recording of this so I can go back
and luckily there's a journal article in the annual reviews of psychology titled Job Burnout by Maslach and her team, and all of this is laid right out in there. So this information is accessible, it's available, it's out there, it's easy enough to find. But the fact that you mentioned family and how family dynamics function is important, because the article that I did last week for the podcast is, these are the 6 areas of life that can affect your burnout risk factor. One of them is work. And we talked about what I just talked about with you. Another one of them is family. And we can, if we have like family at the top as a circle, we can break that down into 2 smaller circles and say family of origin and current family, because those are different factors for you quite often.
Yes.
But if there are very high stress loads on children for various reasons, they were parentified, there's codependency, there's addiction issues, there's whatever it happens to be, there's a certain level of stress that will make them more resilient. And then there's a barrier where eventually long-term, it makes them less resilient. So they might come into a company and only be able to carry 7 pounds versus that other person who carries 10 because of how their stress response systems, because of their family of origin. Right. So these things, the factors that we spoke about can be true in various areas, but also there are other factors in other areas. Does that make sense? All of that. I know this is a very big tangled web I'm weaving for you right now.
No, this is absolutely the point of this podcast, is to, bring things to the surface that I learn so much from every guest, and I'm learning so much even within the first couple minutes on the first question. And what was the name of the factor that you mentioned for the ability for people to handle different amounts of stress?
Allostatic load is not people's ability. It's just how much stress load is in your life right now. But we can't really measure it. Just like we can't really measure resilience. Like we don't have measures for that. What we do have, for instance, measures that we do have, something I talk about in the Bouncebackability Factor, is heart rate variability. So heart rate variability is the differences between the peaks of the top of your heartbeat. I'm saying this in like very non-scientific terms, but the peaks at the top of your heart rate will be different when you're inhaling and exhaling. And the differential between the inhale size and the exhale size is something called a heart rate variability. And the lower this number, the better your heart rate variability, which gives us information that your ability to be adaptable and to shift and change is going to be higher than other people's.
That is a great point, because I feel like I, do a million things in my life, and I kind of do, but I thrive from that.
Yeah, some people do.
And people always ask me, I don't know how you do it all, or they feel like, oh my gosh, you have too much going on, so you must not have time for this, that, and the other. I'm like, well, I mean, I have the ability to make time, or make my energy, manage my energy well enough that I will make time for the things that I think is important, and I find fuel, and rejuvenation from that. But I've noticed that some other person, like you said, might just have one or two things in their life, and that's all they can manage. And I used to always wonder, like, is it because I have a lot of energy, or is it because I've gone through a lot in my life? So these kinds of things like don't really affect me. Like, what is it? And this is great that I just learned that, oh, there's like this factor that you can't say, oh, this person has too much going on, but I can handle it.
Yeah, right. And so it's different for everybody. And I think that's really important, because there's this, especially in the United States, that we love the idea in this country of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Like, well, I did it. If I did it, then you can do it too. And
Right.
that's not always true. Like, it's just, we don't all have the exact same capabilities. This is why conversations about equity are so much more important than conversations about simple equality.
That's a great point. Well, we do need to move on to the next question.
We could do this all day, though.
Yes, we can. I think we need like multiple episodes with you, which, we will set up. So you talked about some of some solutions, techniques that you've developed for burnout recovery. Can you tell us more about that? And also, are they simple, fast, and effective, given that most leaders like myself don't have a whole lot of time on our hands?
The things that we do to help with burnout recovery are simple, fast, and effective, not because you're busy, but because when you are burnt out, your brain literally doesn't have the capacity for anything that's not.
Wow. Okay.
Right. So they have to be simple. They have to be honest, and they have to be effective, because when your brain is functioning the way that it is during burnout, first of all, you don't have the capacity. Second of all, your reward system is not working the way that it should. So you need as many rewards as you can all the time. Like, you become a dopamine addict almost. And in those situations, you have to aim for small, consistent wins, because that's how you will maintain motivation to move forward, because the natural process of gaining motivation through your physical body is not accessible to you at the moment. Like, you can't just motivate through burnout. You don't have access to that skill. So we have to make them small, because otherwise they're totally not accessible to the people that actually need them, which would mean that they are useless completely. One of my favorite things to do, and this is going to sound very counterintuitive, I'm not going to tell you to meditate on gratitude. I'm going to say instead, make a resentment journal.
Wow.
When you're burnt out, you have a lot of access to feelings of anger, irritation, frustration, resentment, a lot of access to them, which means those are the low fruit, right? The low hanging fruit, ripe and ready for picking. If we learn to use the information well, you will regain some energy, which will then allow you to dig into other things that you can do for your burnout. So for me, this means you dive into your resentment, you start looking at it, and you have to get objective about it. So you have to be able to write it down really specifically so that you can look at it and say, okay, what's the one true sentence in here that doesn't have any emotion in it? No blame, no emotion. Like, what's the fact? Is the fact you're working too many hours? Doesn't matter at this point if somebody's asking you to or you're doing it yourself. is the fact that you're not getting enough help. It doesn't matter if nobody's offering or you're not asking. What's the fact? What's really going on here? When you get down to the fact, then you can work for a solution. Well, then how do we fix this fact? Do you need a new boundary? Do you need some support? Do you need to create a new system? Do you need to delegate? Do you need to drop this task completely? Because if you stop doing it today, no one would even ever notice. That's 10% of the things that piss you off in life you could stop doing today and no one would ever notice. What needs to happen here?
Gotcha. Yeah, there's a tool that I have in my book, Chaos Loves You, so let's love it back, called fact versus story, which is very similar because this is more of what happens when there's a conflict and you have your own story, that person has their own story, and then there's the story or just raw facts. And most of the time, if you just start with the raw facts, like, well, this meeting started on this time, this person came at this time. I'm not saying, oh, this person's perpetually late and da 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 da. It's like, well, this is the meeting time, and this is when this person showed up.
Yeah.
And then this is no one can argue those kinds of facts. And I think that's what you're saying. If you kind of get down to the raw facts, most of the times it doesn't, like, oh, okay, well,
Well, or you can at least come up with a solution.
Yes.
If there needs to be a boundary put into place, that's okay. But now you're putting in the boundary into place in factual form instead of emotional form.
Gotcha.
Right. You're saying the meeting started at 10. You were there at 10:09. Next time I need you to be there at 10. That's the whole conversation.
Exactly.
Right. But something that you said earlier, you said, people ask me if I have time, if I don't have time. And I know that I can make time if I want to do something. I can adjust things and do that. Description that you used and this ability to use these facts both rely on a psychological concept called locus of control. Right? If you have an internalized locus of control where you think that you influence your life, you can do that. You can make time. You can. People that have an internalized locus of control, for the most part, do better in life and have an easier time and have less emotional expenditure than others. Sometimes they go overboard and become hyper responsible, right? Everything has two sides.
Yeah.
Right? Every coin has two sides. And people that have an external locus of control, before they're able to really use tools like that, we have to return their control to their bodies. Because if they think that they don't have influence over anything and somebody else can always come in and say left, right, center and throw them completely off and change everything for them, then this is not going to be helpful.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. It's like taking your own inner power and using that for yourself, and not,
or at least understanding that you have it.
Yes.
First and foremost, before even using it, understanding that you do have some influence over your life. You cannot control everything.
Right.
But having an understanding and a belief that you do control some things.
And you can always control your response to a situation too, or change it.
Unless you're burnt out.
Okay.
Sometimes you can't. And this is another tricky thing. So there's a lot of like sort of platitudes in the life coaching world that don't work for burnt out people. And one of those is exactly that. You have the ability to choose your response. When you're burnt out, the parts of your brain that react to danger and then modulate your emotional reaction that are supposed to be very connected neuronally are not connected the way that they're supposed to be. Those phone lines have been snapped. So you will find yourself, one of the prime factors in saying that someone has burnout is emotional exhaustion. Emotional exhaustion is defined as this inability to manage your emotions. So having somebody throw one more meeting on your calendar and like losing it. You had your day set up, your to-do list was fine. You knew you were on the edge, but you were going to be okay. And then somebody calls you without texting, without emailing, they call in the middle of your day and you lose it.
That never happens.
Never to anyone. Right. So it's important to recognize that when people are burnt out, they don't always have access to this control. And part of recovery will be noticing when that control comes back and saying, oh, I don't have to blow up right now, and I can stop myself. But when you're in the middle of burnout, your brain physiology is such that that's not so simple.
Wow.
And really frustrating to burnt out people to hear, because like,
Is there a quick hack that you could give the audience on what can you do like in that moment if you feel burnt out and then something hits you that you were unprepared for, or it was unexpected, instead of kind of lashing out at that person because
I just told you can't control it. And now you're asking me how to tell people to control it.
Exactly.
You're not listening to me. So if you have still a little bit of oomph and you manage to not say anything, get outside as soon as possible. Fresh air. I'm not even going to tell you to take deep breaths. Go look at a tree. Just go outside.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's the hack. Yeah, just go out. Yeah, I don't even care if you're in an outside an apartment building and all there is a shrub and a half patch of grass that 3 dogs peed on this morning. If that's all you got, that's fine, but get outside.
Okay. Would it have the same effect if you, let's just say for whatever hypothetical reason, you can't physically go outside, but you have a window and like looking at nature? Does that have the same effect in the brain?
Stand up, please, while you do it.
Okay.
So moving your body out of the position where something happened is important.
Right. Like changing your physiology.
Yeah, changing your physiology, changing your actual physical structure for a moment is an important piece of that. So if you have a window that you can look out of and that's all you have time for, please stand up while you do it.
Okay. Great.
Or sit down if you were standing or whatever.
Right. Right. Just
change.
Great. And I know, Cait, when we had spoken earlier, you were talking about how you got into acupuncture and Chinese medicine. Can you tell us, what led you there, and how do you factor in these Eastern wellness principles in your techniques?
So for me, the funniest part of this story is, without knowing it, this is only hindsight gives me this very clear view, that I did not end up going into medicine as a pre-med student into Western medicine because I was afraid of burning out.
There's always a story.
Yeah. And then I burnt out anyway, but I did start as a pre-med student at Boston University, and I was in my second year of pre-med, and I was like, this is not going to work for me for a million reasons. It's a whole story. And my minor at the time, my major was biology on a pre-med track. My minor was Eastern religion. And I went to a professor who was teaching a meditation course that I was taking that semester. And I said, Livia, I don't know what to do. My whole life, my plan was to be a doctor. Like, I don't know what to do. And she said, well, do Chinese medicine. I said, well, what the F is that? I was 19, and she looked at me and she said, well, here's a book. And like, I started reading about it and I couldn't believe how much sense it made. The interconnectedness of everything, how everything influences everything else, how in Chinese medicine, there's always an explanation for why something happens. I don't always know it. I've been in Chinese medicine 20 years and I don't always get the right explanation, but there's always something. It's not this Western medicine idea of like, well, we don't know why it happens. Chinese medicine always has something.
Or throw a pill at it, or yeah.
Right, exactly. So
surgery.
I really loved that. And also, on the ego side, it was still a master's degree. You have to have a master's degree in the United States to practice Chinese medicine.
Oh.
And if I wasn't going to have an MD, I most certainly wasn't going to do a massage course for 3 months and then call myself a healer, which I think people can. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing to do, but in my mind, I was already taking a step down on the clout escalator.
Right.
And I didn't want to go too far down.
Right.
So I loved the medicine and it was a serious degree. And those two things together, I was like, great, I'm sold. I moved to California and went for it.
Wow. Well, we have similar journeys because I started off pre-med as well. And I got into a 7-year med program. I could have just aced through like MCATs because, once you got into the program, like you're in and, you don't really, as long as you kept up grades. And I think I was almost in my second year because I had so many AP classes,
Mhm.
did biology, chemistry all
Mhm.
throughout high
Mhm.
school. I'm
Same.
like, okay, I'm gonna go in there almost my second year. I just needed a couple more classes. And the first course was a bunch of doctors that came like, look, why do you want to do this? I'm like, oh, I want to help people. And like, that's your only reason? Like, yeah, I want to help
Mhm.
people. And like, well, if that's your only reason, then there's other ways of helping people. And then they kind of went into, do you want to start a family one day? I'm like, yeah, have kids and have a life. And they're like, yeah, you're really like on the wrong track here. And I also, like you, started noticing, I didn't know about Chinese traditional medicine then, but I was always more of a natural person. Like I never really popped pills just because I have a headache. I would just try to, okay, let me try to, nap for 20 minutes. Let me just try to do some breathing just naturally without
Yeah.
knowing much. And the one part that never resonated with me was patient comes in with a headache. What do you do? Oh, throw them a Tylenol. Patient comes with a stomach ache. What do you do? Oh, throw them this other thing. Throw them and then I would constantly question the teachers who are doctors, like, yeah, but don't you want to get to the root cause of why they're coming in with a headache? And they're like, do you want to make money or not? You're going to be fired as a doctor if you don't solve the problem immediately. And I was like, but what if that's not their problem? What if they just didn't drink enough water
Mhm.
and they're dehydrated, which caused the
Mhm.
headache? And they're like, no, just the right answer to the quiz question
Is
is
Tylenol.
Tylenol. So do you want to pass your exams or not? And I'm like, I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I don't think this is for me. So
Yeah.
unlike you, I went into engineering and ended up being an electrical engineering major. But fast forward
Yeah.
20 years, and now I'm a holistic wellness practitioner. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is my way of helping people in a more
Yeah.
natural and a way that can prevent problems versus just trying to put band-aid fixes and solving the
Yeah.
symptoms.
Put out fires all the time. That was another thing that I loved about Chinese medicine. I said, "Oh, you mean I'm going to get to talk to my patients? Like actually talk to them?" And one of the people I went to school with, I remember I had finished school. I moved to Poland. My husband was Polish. So I moved to Poland and I opened a practice there and I started working, and she wasn't even done with med school yet. And she
Oh,
said, "Oh
wow.
my God, you're so lucky you get to spend your time with patients." And I was like, "I can't believe you're still paying $300,000 for school."
Wow. Yeah.
You know, like,
Yeah. Yeah. And you're really getting to know the patient and
yeah.
see how it's all interconnected
I
versus
just heard from one of my patients from Prague this week. I haven't lived in Prague in 4 years. These are people that I love.
yeah.
These are people that I have a relationship with.
Right. Right. And you genuinely care about their
Yes,
wellness.
I was so happy to get this email.
So do you in addition to Chinese medicine, do you also practice any other Eastern medicine like Ayurveda or maybe homeopathy?
No, so my degree is Chinese medicine. I am a Chinese medicine practitioner, and that being said, I am not practicing at the moment. Actually, exactly 1 year ago, I shut down my acupuncture office in New York City, and my full-time work now is keynote speaking.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Very cool.
Yeah.
So what can leaders, not just in the technology space, but pretty much any space, and if you're not a leader in your career, you're still a leader of your own life, right? Um, what can we do to foster and empower our staff and organizations, or maybe our families or children, to prioritize their health and wellness over all else?
I think that the most important thing, and I think usually comes second or third or fourth or misses the list completely, but the most important thing is modeling. You prioritize yourself first. You don't email your employees at 9 p.m. on a Sunday. You don't answer emails when you are on vacation. You trust people to get their work done when you are not there. You take that, just the very basics. You model the behavior you want to see. Everyone that has ever had children knows that they will model the behavior, whether it's good or not.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying your employees are like your children. That would not be a smart thing to say. However, we still do work on mirror neurons, and we still do work by observation, and we still do take our cues from the people in leadership. So if you tell me to go enjoy my vacation and then you email me at noon on Tuesday, I think I have to respond. I don't care what you said to me before I left about not responding, because now I'm questioning whether or not you meant it.
Right. Right.
Model the behavior that you want people to be able to use.
No, that's a great point, even about kids, because being a single mom, like you can never say, well, mommy's on break right now. I don't have nannies and babysitters and other people helping out. And at times I used to feel guilty, and I don't anymore, but I used to like, oh, like I feel like I need a break, but then I have like 3 kids here. What should I do? And like I have my work, and then I have my businesses. And now I'm like, you know what? I need a break. And my kids are 5, 8, and 11 right now. Like they're not babies or infants. Like they're not being stranded or left alone on the street or anything like that. And the guys are in a safe home. This is our home. There's food on the table. You guys know where the snacks are. Nothing, don't do anything crazy and try to kill each other. In those 5 minutes that I'm taking for myself. And they get it now. I'm like, okay, I'm going to be right over here. I'm not going anywhere, but just don't come and bother me unless it's like truly life threatening.
Somebody lost a finger, let me know.
Right. And
otherwise
don't go near the knives. And they get it now. In fact, they'll probably just watch TV for, 5 minutes. And then they're like, and then when I come back, it's usually like, oh, you're done already. I'm like, oh, what were you doing that, like we just started a movie. I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm fine with that. This is not the end of the world. You're not going to be on your gadgets 24/7. And if this is a win-win, like I can take 20 minutes maybe to meditate and really get my energy back. And if you want to watch your TV for 20 minutes, great. And when we come back together, we can do something that's actually more energetic and fun, because I'll have the energy and
to be present.
Which is more important than just trying to be this perfect mom type of figure,
what does that even mean? Nobody even knows what that means. I'm back in school because extra degrees, but I'm doing a class on infant and childhood development right now. And there's a lot of questions still. We just don't know that much.
Yeah. And I'm taking, just like leadership in the work, it's just like taking leadership at home. Like I do not know the answers. I make mistakes. Should I have raised my voice? No, but I apologize. And I was frustrated, and just being honest. I'm like, hey, this is my day. This is how many meetings I had. And they're like, yeah, but we don't really care about what you do during your day. I'm like, yeah, you don't need to care. But I'm letting you know, like, at this point in time of the day, I've already been up for this many hours and I've already done this much stuff and faced this much stress. And, maybe I'm not at my best, 24/7, 100% of the time. So, please excuse me for when I need a break.
And there's just I think the message that I would love to put out there behind that is, if you have some internalized rules about perfect mothering, if you're listening to this and you're like, yes, but I have to be the perfect mother, what I want you to know is you made up the stories, or you internalized the stories from your community, from your own parents, about what a perfect mother means. But there is literally no such thing. And you could be perfect for one of your children and be really crappy for the other, because they're different people. And so let it go, because you can't, there's no research that tells us exactly what you would need to do and how you would need to be the perfect mother. So if we don't have that information, stop pretending like and let go of this need to create this perfect thing that you're never going to create, because you won't even know when you get there, because we don't know what the data points are.
That, everything resonated with me 100%. But the one part that was also a light bulb moment is like, well, you could feel like or you could be, hypothetically speaking, the perfect mom for one kid, but not the other. I'm like, oh my gosh, like that is so true. Because if you ask any one of my kids at any moment, like, oh yeah, mom's amazing, at this moment. But then another child might be like, oh my gosh, like mom, so she has all these rules and structure, and it's the same in the workplace too,
Yeah.
right? Like if you're a leader, you will not be the perfect leader for everyone.
No.
Yeah, that's
There's a theory called the goodness of fit theory. And we're sort of extrapolating it a little bit. Basically, if you have an employee that doesn't fit your team and doesn't fit your leadership style, that doesn't always mean you have to change as a leader. But what it does mean is you have to be a very honest leader and have a transparent conversation with this employee about where they would be a better fit within the company or without. A lot of times we're not willing to have that. People are talking about quiet quitting a lot. We're not talking about quiet firing, where a leader sort of ignores one of their people until they're quitting on their own because they didn't want to have to fire them because they're just not a good fit. Not everybody's going to be a good fit. You are never going to create a workplace that is perfect for every employee that walks through your door. And some people are going to seem like they fit perfectly on the interview. And 6 months later, you're going to be like, ooh,
right.
Ooh, this was not the right choice. But you can't know that in an interview.
Yeah. And people do change. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe inherently there's some traits that
Of
you don't
course.
change, but there's always situations that can change. There's
Yeah.
personal, things that can happen in their life. And then now they start changing how they, show up to work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. There's so many factors involved there. So as much as you can't be a perfect mother, you can't be a perfect leader to everyone either. And there's a lot of pressure on leaders right now to
Yeah.
create inclusive environments and safe environments and psychologically. And I think these things are important. I'm not digging on it. But what a psychologically safe environment means to person A is not what it means to person B.
Right.
You have to find your people.
Most definitely. So Cait, can you tell us, you do so many great things, being the burnout coach, at some point doing acupuncture, and there seems to be something that led you there. Can you talk to us about some of your experiences and that you've had in your life that have shaped who you are today? And was there a time, or maybe times, where you felt awakened to a new reality and changed the way you did things in life from that?
I've done that multiple times. I've done that a lot, but I think it's important for the factors that can dampen your own ability to respond well to stress. They start with intergenerational trauma, right? This is the first thing, because now we're talking on a very basic level about your epigenetics. And there are epigenetic changes to stress modulating genes that make your stress management system wonkier than other people's. That just happens. And that can be from when your grandmother was stressed out, pregnant with your mother. This typically goes through the female line, right? Or when your mother was pregnant with you and going through her own stress. When my mother was pregnant with me, my father was an addict and an alcoholic. So the chances that I started off with some sort of detriment in that regard are high. My father wasn't sober until I was 6. 0 to 6 are prime neurological development years. So I didn't learn how to co-regulate with people the right way, because what I learned to do was scan my environment and fix things so that I could manage my father's mood.
Right.
So, and I did that for the rest of my life until I realized how burnt out I was and started paying attention to, okay, well, why am I burnt out? Being able to read into other people's moods. People call this being an empath. This is a trauma response, really, for most people. My ability to do that was really beneficial to me.
Right.
Friends felt heard and understood and validated, right? So I was always the friend that people leaned on. And I liked it that way because that was a safe place for me to be. It put me in control. It put me in power. I didn't admit to it like that until I was an adult, but that's what it did. When I was a practitioner, it helped my patients because I could read into their needs and their desires and things that they might not be saying better than some other practitioners, because I could feel things. Right. So this was a really beneficial skill for me that at some point I just overused. And I found myself scanning my environments constantly. Like if you dropped a pencil on the sidewalk and didn't even notice, I'm the girl running up behind you like, sir, you dropped your pencil. You don't even care about the pencil. But I was so busy solving problems that didn't even exist for other people because I was so worried about everyone's comfort level all the time that I completely abandoned myself. I was in this, like, my body. When I say my house, I'm thinking my body was completely neglected because my energy was out there like a spotlight scanning around me all the time for other people's comfort or discomfort.
Wow.
So this was my biggest shift when I realized I was burnt out, and when I was going through my recovery with coaching and therapy and nutrition changes and all sorts of things. I used everything that I could get my hands on. I am not one of those people that claims to have done it alone. I think that that's BS. When I was going through that, I had to pay really close attention to, when is my energy leaving my body? And at first, the question was more, when can I put my energy in my body? When is it safe enough for me to put my energy in my body? Because my energy was never in my body. It was always somewhere else. So the biggest shift in how I learned to behave was to center myself again, center myself in my own experience again, and get out of some people's business. Like I was a meddler. Let me see. I was the savior, the martyr, the fixer. I don't do that anymore. I help people still because I love to help people. But I'm much more apt these days to say, do you need to vent or would you like a suggestion?
That's a great point. Yeah, I noticed that once you put on the coaching hat or life coach or healer or practitioner or whatever, you are, it's hard to take that hat off.
It's not anymore for me.
Right. Yeah.
I'm like, go live your life, sister. Good for you. Do what you want.
That really hit home for me, because I think I've felt that I was an empath because I could feel what the other person's feeling, even though it wasn't my thing to feel. And then I used to feel like, oh, I have to solve this for them, or I need to help them solve it. And here's the solution, or here's a solution. And they're like, no, we're not doing that. Or there's something. I'm like, oh, and then I felt dejected. It's like, oh, why aren't they doing this? Like, this could totally help them. And then 2 months later, it's the same issue. And I'm like, oh, like you're still facing.
If they would just listen to me.
and it's hard because this recently I did this life coaching program, and they were all about helping. You're still helping the person, but you're helping them come up with their own solutions and what did they feel they should do. And my number one question is like, well, but what if you already have the solution? They're like, okay, Jothi, how many times have you been in a situation in your own life and somebody says, oh, just do this, and you're like, okay, it doesn't resonate with me at the moment. 2 months later, it's like you do exactly what they said, but it's almost like you came up with it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm doing this, and then they're like, didn't we tell you to do that like 2 months ago? I'm like, oh, well, yeah, but but now I feel like it's my idea because I had to come up with it. I had to resonate with it.
We're back to locus of control, right? This puts the locus of control inside the other person, which is what I think the power of life coaching, a good life coach.
Yeah.
The power of a good coach returns the locus of control to the client.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I only work with people for 3-month spans. I don't need you to rely on me. I don't even want you to think you're going to have to.
Right.
I want you to know I'm here for you afterwards. I have one-off calls available to my previous clients if they need me for whatever reason 6 months later. But I want you to know before we even start that I think that within 90 days, you're going to be in a place where you're going to be able to do this.
Right. Right.
90 days. It's not a long time.
Right.
Burnout takes a year to heal for most people at least. And I'm telling you that in 90 days, you're going to be okay. Not that you're going to be through burnout, but you're going to be far enough along this path that I'm not going to need to hold your hand anymore. You might need to grab somebody else's hand for a moment because you need to work on a different thing. You might need a functional medicine doctor. You might need a naturopath. You might need whatever it happens to be, but you're going to know what you need without me.
Right. So Kate, can you tell us, do you, among everything that you do and you practice and you teach, are there any morning rituals that you've created for yourself, or really any kind of rituals that you follow throughout the day or at night?
I don't believe in rituals, and I know that this is not a popular opinion in the life coaching world. I believe in them from a Chinese medicine perspective, because rituals do something in Chinese medicine called calming the shen, calming the heart. So calming anxiety. When you have rituals and you do them the same way all the time, it should create a sense of calm in your life. I have ADHD. You can't give me a ritual because I'm not going to be able to do it. I will do it for 3 days straight, and then I will forget on the third morning. I won't even avoid doing it. I won't even remember that it was ever a thing, and then I'll move on. So it's not something that really works in my life. So I don't have many of them. I know I have to exercise most days, but what kind of exercise I do, when I do it, and how I do it, who knows how that's going to happen.
Are there, maybe not rituals, but are there any practices, or are there tools that you use?
I use yoga nidra on a regular basis, or body scan meditations, as we've culturally appropriated that tool, but it is called yoga nidra. And I use yoga nidra a lot, and the research behind yoga nidra is really clear on the fact that it helps to reconnect those places that were disconnected that I was talking about earlier in the podcast. So your ability to manage your emotions and to connect with your more primal states and be able to react to them from a mature space, yoga nidra helps your brain reconnect those areas. And the research is really clear that 10 minutes a day for a month is enough to keep you going for 6 months. Oh, so wow. Whenever I get into a sort of a worse zone, I go straight to that because it's free, available everywhere on YouTube, Insight Timer, wherever you want to go. It's easy. I do it before bed, so I usually fall asleep with it in. It doesn't require a lot from me, but its impact is so great.
Gotcha. Have you heard of a technique? I learned this one's called positive intelligence.
No.
Okay. It's somewhat similar, where they teach quick ways where you can slowly start kind of reconnecting the neural pathways in your brain. I think the gray matter.
Gray matter just means it doesn't have myelin sheath. That doesn't mean much.
I was trying to remember, but one thing that they taught is how to use your physical senses.
Yeah.
So whenever something's going on, they said, okay, immediately focus on one of your 5 senses, either just stare at a tree and then really focus on the tree and nothing else. And then, or touch your fingertips together, just focus on the sensation.
Yeah. I love that.
Right. And or use your smell, what is the closest thing you smell? And then just focus on all the different kind of parts of so just use one of the senses instead of the mental capacity.
I think that's a very smart thing to do.
So I'm wondering if the yoga nidra has similar.
Yoga nidra is about internal sensation, right? Is when you lay down you're in shavasana at the end of a yoga class, and the teacher says, relax your forehead, relax your jaw, relax it. That's yoga nidra, basically.
Okay.
Right. So that sort of internal sensing of relaxation in various parts of your that just was so Boston of me, Patsy, a baddie. Parts of your body. When you do that, you are helping your nervous system, because everything starts to calm down, and you're making a connection from your brain to your fingertip that you're focusing on so it is a sensory experience of internal sense.
Okay.
So it's a similar sort of practice in slightly different twist, but yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So cool. Coming down to our last question of the day, in this modern age, we have technology, and if you're in the technology industry, you're even more so connected to technology 24/7. And for our younger generation, for children, adolescents, if they're provided with some sort of gadget or technology, which they are now, even directly from schools, it's become the norm to be connected to it. What are your thoughts on do you have any ways of countering the adverse effects of technology and the mind, body, and energy? What if they have to have the gadget, and how can we try to reduce the risk of obsessive use or try to counter the obsessive use?
I think before thinking about obsessive use, we have to think about what it interferes with and what we can do to enhance our own body's ability to manage that. So the Huberman podcast has a lot of good resources on the usage of dawn and dusk and circadian rhythms to keep your hormonal cascades working the way that they need to. So this is going for a 10-minute walk in the morning around dawn, going for a 10-minute walk in the morning around in the afternoon around dusk, and allowing there's certain cells, retinal cells, that in your eyes that react only to what's referred to as blue light, which happens at those 2 times of day, that inform hormonal cascades, and screens can interrupt those retinal cells' ability to function well, right? So getting good quality dawn light and dusk light as often as you can will help to counteract the use of screens without managing anything else. I always go for like the easiest task, like what's the easiest way to, if I can't manage how much I use this, what do I need to do to enhance my ability to use it?
Right. Okay. So mostly it's coming back to spending time in nature, but to try to counter whatever you're doing at home.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. And then when the weather, if you live on the East Coast and the weather gets bad during winter,
put on better clothes and go outside.
Okay. I'll still try to get out.
Yes.
I'm thinking for myself, like once it gets like below 60, like, oh, it's cold outside. Now I need a jacket.
Yes. Go still get the right clothes. Go outside.
Okay. And it doesn't have to, do you recommend any set period of time, or even if it's 5 minutes, that's good enough?
Anything is going to be more than nothing.
Okay.
We start with that. Huberman says, especially in the morning, if the sky is clear, there's not a lot of clouds, that 10 minutes is sufficient. And that more than that, if it's an overcast sort of day. But going outside for a minute and a half, if you're not going outside at all during that time, is still going to be better than not going outside at all.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much, Cait. This has been a truly, awakening moment for me. I think this is going to go down as this is one of my awakening moments.
Yay!
I will certainly listen to this podcast for myself, because there's so much information loaded into our last hour. Can you please tell the audience where they can find you if they'd like to reach out to you?
The best place to find me is at Fried the Burnout Podcast. So just going to the podcast, because in every single set of show notes are all the links you need to find me. Everything is there. It's easy to remember. And any information that you're looking for, we've probably covered at one time or another. So you can also scroll through while you're there and get whatever you need.
Great. And any last words of wisdom before we close today?
Be gentle with yourselves, please. There's so much pressure to do so many things well and correct right now, and the rules are changing every day. Give yourself a little bit of grace and a little bit of time to get used to some things, to make some shifts, to just be gentle with yourself, please.
All right. Great advice and great insight. Thank you so much, Cait. And that's a wrap, folks. Thank you so much for listening. We will have all the links to Cait and this podcast on the IDCA website. See you all every third Wednesday of the month to focus on your wellness and leading your life well from within.